Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this latest episode of On the Record podcast with Campaign Middle East. I'm Anup Oman, the editor of Campaign Middle East, and joining us today is a very special guest, Sir Martin Sorrell, founder of WPP and founder and executive chairman of S4 Capital. Thank you, Sir Martin, for taking the time to join us here virtually today.
Well, we're virtually from Shanghai, so just arrived here. So good to see you.
The pleasure is ours. Great to see you as well. So, Martin, from what I've heard from leaders in Saudi Arabia and in the UAE, everyone seems to be very excited to hear you speak at Athar, the Saudi Festival of Creativity in November. I'd like to hear from you. Are you excited about the festival as well? What are you looking forward to? And how important, in your opinion, are creative festivals such as Athar for the development of the marketing and advertising industry, specifically in Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think they're really important for the region and really important to position the region as an area of growth. I think in a world which is, I would describe as a troubled world, with all the big geopolitical issues that we face as a world. Firstly, the US and China, where I am at the moment. Secondly, Russia and Ukraine, and third, not least, developments recently in the Middle East around Gaza and Iran in particular. I think all these things point out the need for our clients to select their areas of growth with care. And when you think about the growth areas in the world, you think about North and South America, you think about the Middle East, and you think about Asia. And maybe less so Europe because of the challenges that Europe faces, and also maybe Africa because of the volatility. But the Middle East offers, despite the challenges that we have there in the region, the political challenges, offers very significant growth. And therefore, a festival such as this is really important in embedding in people's minds, that's clients, agencies, their leaders on both sides, the media, the importance of the region and the growing importance of the region. You mentioned in particular Saudi Arabia, and what His Majesty is doing in terms of repositioning Saudi and indeed the region is something from a country point of view or regional point of view, we've never really seen before. We're seeing the repositioning of Saudi and the region, not just economically, but culturally, politically, socially. So we're not just talking about the Olympics or the World Cup or Formula One. We're talking about something that's much more fundamental in terms of re-establishing the balance for Saudi and for the kingdom and for the region on a world stage. And I remember a speech that His Majesty made, I think it was probably one of the FII conferences, where he referred to the Middle East and indeed Saudi becoming the new Europe. And everybody was very motivated and energized by that speech, by that comment. And I think that embodies what I'm talking about. So the festival is really important from a global point of view. It's important from a regional point of view. And it's important from an industry point of view because it positions the region as a growth area and one that the managements of all the clients and indeed the agencies should focus on with renewed vigor.
How are you feeling about all of this? How are you feeling about your participation at Athar as one of the headline speakers there?
Well, I'm the
How are you?
opportunity of doing it. I mean, we're doing a lot of work in the kingdom and in the region. So we're looking to obviously build our business there. We just recently established our office in Riyadh, in addition to the people we have in Neom, in the kingdom. But, in Dubai and elsewhere in the region, we're building a significant business for us. It started from small beginnings, but now we have very significant clients in the region, not just in Saudi, but in UAE and Doha and elsewhere, Dubai. And we wish to build the business to a very significant scale.
How are you? Thank you for sharing that, Sir Martin. The industry leaders we've spoken to have also insinuated that the word Athar in itself stands in Arabic for impact. or effectiveness, which seems to have become indeed the theme of the year, so to speak, in 2024, as we see creativity move from just creativity to creative effectiveness and creative impact. What are your perspectives on the creative industry and where it needs to go in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia?
Well, just as we're seeing in the rest of the world, I mean, there are two forces that are driving it. The first, obviously, is the creative force that you highlight, but it's also the technological force, and bringing those two together as one in a world where technology is becoming ever increasingly important, and the region, because of its youthful population, because of its facility, its facility with technology, the penetration of mobile technology, the penetration even at an early stage of AI technology, which we're about to see even more development, not just in the kingdom, but in the region as a whole, it is really very significant. So it's really, the issue is about, if you talk about impact, it's about marrying the creative forces with the technological forces. Often people see creative and data or creative and technology being enemies of one another. They're not. They are forces that complement one another, and as long as you bring them together effectively, they can be even more effective with even greater impact, if you like, in the context not just of the festival but the industry as a whole. So marrying the two together, I mean, I think the most exciting developments at the moment are the AI-driven impact in visualization and copywriting, or in personalization at scale, or in media planning and buying, or in general efficiency at agency and client level. And last but not least, in spreading knowledge, in what I call the democratizing of knowledge. I mean, it's making organizations much flatter in terms of their execution and their structure. And it's enfranchising people throughout the organization to understand what's going on in a much more effective way, really lessening the silos and the divisions and the physical blocking that you get, organizational blocking that you get within large, medium-sized and small operations.
That is a very interesting perspective indeed, in terms of how diffusion models and LLMs are marrying, like you said, technology and creativity. Before we continue, I'd be remiss if I had you on the show and I didn't ask you a few personal questions about yourself. So, looking back at your career, Sir Martin, what's the one decision you say you'd be proud of, and what's the one thing you would have done differently?
Well, I wouldn't particularly highlight any one decision on the first part of your question. The one thing one of the public mistakes I would admit to is that I remember when we structured the Ogilvy merger or acquisition, actually, long time ago, in 1989, we took on too much debt. And I forgot that at that time we used a convertible preferred. I won't bore you with the complexities of the financing for that transaction, because it was a company that was at the time, I think, about double our size. But it was a transaction that involved debt and a convertible with JWT, which was 13 times our size 2 years previously. We used a mixture of debt and equity. But with the Ogilvy case, it was debt and convertible preferred. When you have a recession, which we had in 91 and 92, convertible preferreds don't convert. They stay as preferreds, and in that case, it was a preferred instrument that was not tax deductible and therefore had effectively double the cost. I think the coupon was 6.7%, but effectively it was at about 12 or 13%. It was too much debt. So that's the only thing I would admit to publicly. But on the we made a number of good decisions over the years. The big issue is whether you can make more decisions that are good than those that are bad. So I wouldn't point to anything or boast about anything in particular. The record stands for itself.
I love that. You've been a leader who's always led by example, and that's something that we within the industry have looked up to over a period of time. But personally to you, what core principles have guided your leadership style, and how have those principles evolved over the years?
Well, when you get knighted in the UK, you have to go and to the College of Heraldry and design a shield, and you have a motto. You can have the motto in Latin. No. You can have the motto in Arabic if you like, or in Hebrew for that matter. And I chose in Latin, the Latin equivalent, I think, was persistentia et celeritate, which means persistence and speed. So if asking me, what values do I place great store in? In for the ones that people usually trot out in relation to questions of this nature, I would say persistence and speed. I always used to say, and this wasn't a particularly good quote, a good decision on Monday is better. A bad decision on Monday is better than a good decision on Friday. So you get my meaning. So I think persistence. Nothing is impossible. When I was at Sarches before I started WPP, I mean, that was one of the things that we always used to talk about. So nothing is impossible. So persistence and speed. I would say at the moment, and this brings me to it's a broader answer than you're asking for, but I'll take this opportunity to say it. I think, there are three things that marketers should really think about at the moment. One is, and they will permeate the festival. One is agility in a world which is so volatile. You wake up one morning and find things have changed quite dramatically. Agility is absolutely core and key. And I know a lot of people talk about agility, but very few organizations practice it to the degree that they should. That's on the client side, if I can be so bold, and on the agency side. The second point is to take back control in a world where technology is becoming data is becoming in control of data, and distribution is becoming more and more important. Controlling what you do. After the great financial crisis of 2008, the fashion was to outsource to agencies. We at S4 and our operating brand Monks, so we now call it, we shortened it from Media Monks. We have three models. One is the classic outsource model where clients say, you do the job for us. The second is the embedded model where we put people into their organization. And the third is the in-house model. I think the last two are becoming more and more fashionable, if I can put it. The embedded models are people, but embedded in the client. And secondly, the in-house model. We're not frightened to say to a client, as many agencies are, that you should in-house the activity, thinking that they would lose their... We think there's after-sales service around data and keeping data up to date and technology, and also people. Those people in one vertical or one industry tend to become very narrow in terms of their knowledge, or narrower. Obviously, as a journalist, the more that you cover, the better the frame of references. So the second area is take back control. And after the great financial crisis, the financial and procurement departments tended to outsource a lot. So I think what we're starting to see, particularly with AI and the importance of data, as I said, and distribution, and those being what incumbents really have, and they can really wrestle with AI on that basis, I think take back control is really important. And the third area is first-party data. Control with deprecation of third-party cookies by Google, which and the development of IDFA changes by Apple to cohorts instead of individual IP addresses. Control of first-party data. We use the word manipulation, but I don't mean it in that sense. But organization of that data is critically important. So agility, take back control, and first-party data are really important in today's environment.
Persistence, speed, agility, take back control, and first-party data. All these are my top
different answers to your question, but yes,
all answers are welcome. All answers are welcome. But these are some top takeaways for me as well from this conversation. And these are a lot of core principles that, we're learning from leaders like you. But here's the kicker. Who are the mentors that you learned from back in the day? What lessons would you have learned when in your early days that you would like now to pass on to the young leaders of today?
Well, everybody has their own idols. So there's IDOLS, not IDLES. Um, and mine was my father. I had a very close relationship. My father was a retailer, so retail is detail. That's really important. But knowing the consumer obviously was really important in the context of that. Design was important in his particular business, designing stores, and I used to spend a lot of time. And even in the days when I was building the WPP at the beginning, I used to spend, even before mobile phones, as I would spend, each day maybe 5 or 6 times a day talking to my father about various issues and opportunities. So that's, I would say, one idol. Now, the other two people probably are people that nobody on this call will remember, but there were two people. One was a man called Jules Thorne, became Sir Jules Thorne. He was a Jewish immigrant from Vienna in the 1930s. Uh, fled the Holocaust, the Nazis, in the 1930s to the UK. Started a lighting factory in Enfield, a fluorescent tube lighting factory, and built a big industrial business in radio and television, and fridges, washing machines, domestic appliances, a big manufacturer. Thorne Electrical Industries no longer. It was absorbed into other companies, sadly, but he was a peanut. He was even smaller than I was physically, but relentless energy, boundless energy, brilliant mind, inquiring mind. So that was one. And the second after my father, and the third was a man called Lord Weinstock, who built the British General Electric. And Lord Weinstock was a conglomerate, and he was famous for calling a factory manager on a Friday evening at around 3 or 4 in the afternoon, or 4 or 5, and to try and find out what was going on inside his organization. So he would delve deep into the organization to find out what was going on from a factory manager or worker or whatever it happened to be. And he built a leading industrial business in the UK. It became a peer. Jules Thorne was knighted, and Lord Weinstock was made a peer. And I always remember seeing him for lunch. It was on actually the day that we launched the bid for Ogilvy that I referred to before. But I saw him for lunch, and I remember him saying to me that he was very conservative in the way he built the business, very detail orientated. I used to have a little article on him on my desk at Sargent's, which listed the ratios that he looked at when he was looking at how a business performed. But he was very detail orientated. But I remember him saying at that lunch, I said, "What do you regret?" A bit like your question about what are you proud of and what are you not proud of. And he said he was too conservative, and he invested a lot in joint ventures with Siemens and other companies, and he was very cash rich, and he didn't use the cash in the business as aggressively. And joint ventures, he said, were a waste of time. He said, because nobody was the boss. Anyway, so those three people, not people that, obviously people in our industry had heroes. I met David Ogilvy. There were people like Bill Bernbach, who I also met many, many years before. Before that, Raymond Rubicon. I mean, all these people were people that you looked up to in the context of the industry. Probably of those people, I spent the most time with David Ogilvy. Initially, it was very fractious, but when we met, he did write me a public apology and said he came to views before he met me. It was his first public apology, which we never made public. I've still got it in my study at home, the letter he wrote to me. But no, I met all those people. But I would say those three, my father, Sir Jules Thorne, Lord Weinstock, who are people probably that people on this call would not know of, but you can delve. I'm sure if you Google them, you could find them. They made a big impact on me in my early years.
And while we're still on this conversation, I'm absolutely enjoying every bit of this. So thank you for being so candid and honest in your responses. But before we conclude, I'd like to pivot to your advice for the industry as well. From all that you've shared, there are a lot of aspiring marketers, aspiring professionals. A lot of them are going to be at Athar, especially at the talent and training
Yeah.
academies, and people to listen in. What advice would someone of your caliber to have to give to some of these young professionals aspiring to make a mark in what has now become an ever evolving industry, an industry that always seems to be in a state of flux?
Well, my father's advice to me was find an industry you enjoy, find a company in that industry that you enjoy, build a reputation, and then if you fancy doing something on your own, go and do it on your own. After you've built experience and after you've built a reputation, not a reputation to be interviewed by you on campaign, but a reputation for being trusted in doing what you're doing. Given what you just said about, and I said about volatility, maybe life has changed. That was my father's advice. And maybe that's not as sound advice today as it was then, because maybe the volatility means that you have to shift continuously in terms of what you do. But I still think that advice has a lot of value and that we should continue to think about things in that way. So find an industry you enjoy, in company within it, and then build a reputation. And then, if you fancy doing something, for want of a better word, entrepreneurial, do it. And I think that still holds. Now, the other things I would add is I think I'm sitting here in Shanghai, so I will say this: learn Chinese. I mean, Arabic will become more and more important, but I'd learn Chinese. I would also learn Spanish. I think Latin America, South America is a really underappreciated region for the quality of creative talent. Work out of Argentina, particularly Buenos Aires, is amongst the best you'll see in the world, without doubt. Not just Argentina, but Sao Paulo, some from Mexico City now, Bogota. But I would say Buenos Aires, to me, something about football. I don't know, I can say that because I'm talking to Middle Eastern and particularly to Saudis. There's something about football, Boca and River Plate in Buenos Aires that drives the creative juices. So I would learn Spanish. And then the third language is code. Now, you don't have to learn code anymore, apparently, because you use AI instead of. But I think the lesson behind that is to have a very strong technological base to what you're doing. Technology is not the enemy, as I said at the beginning, of what we do. It helps what we do. I mean, there is this debate of whether AI is an existential threat. I mean, I saw an article this morning, actually, funnily enough, about a scientific, I think it was a university, that had built an AI model that this is an AI, an LLM, which comes up with research ideas. So it's an LLM which has absorbed all research. I can't remember which area it was in. And it is coming up itself with ideas, research ideas. The professor said there was nothing sort of awe-inspiring or earth-shattering about the ideas it came out with, but he said it was cool. So we're starting to see machines develop thinking. You may remember that the guy, I think his name was Jeffrey Hinton, who was a founder of DeepMind, who resigned from DeepMind, which Google bought in 2014, because he was worried about the existential threat of AI, that machines would be, what I used to read in the comics when I was young about machines taking over, that some Orwellian nightmare was going to come true. And he resigned because he is worried about that and the unrestricted development of machines. But I do think understanding code is really important, and understanding how these things work from a technological point of view is really important. So I would say, look, there are two things that dominate everything we do: geography and technology. Mm-hmm. Those are the two buckets. If I look at what I've been involved in, Sartre was about geography and globalization. WPP was about globalization and the rise of technology. S4 is more about the rise of technology. And I think if you marry those two things together, the geographical, where we started this interview around geography and geopolitical stuff, and you marry that with where we're ending it on the technology, you get a good broad sweep of the impact that will impact the festival and impact what people of the region and the impact of what people think of the kingdom, for example.
Perfect. Well, everyone's heard it first here. Find an industry that you are good at and you love. Find a company within that industry, get great, and if possible, and you like it, become an entrepreneur. But of course, there's the more hands-on advice of find your geography, find your code, learn languages like Chinese, Arabic, and Spanish, and of course, learn the language of code. And that's a wrap. Once again, thank you, Sir Martin, for your very wonderful and hands-on insights,
Sorry, I was
advice, snippets of
sorry,
your
I
life.
was so casually dressed, but it's really hot here in Shanghai.
Absolutely fine. It was a joy to have you on the show
Thank you
today.
very much.
For those of you watching, Sir Martin Sorrell is a headline speaker at Athar, the Saudi Festival of Creativity, which is being held on the 5th and 6th of November in Riyadh. The full lineup of speakers as well as opportunities, which include talent and training initiatives, have been announced as well. To find out more, visit atharfestival.com. That's all for now. And until next episode of the On the Record podcast, goodbye.